Greetings from love, lies, and deception. Join us as we examine the tales and mysteries of adultery. Lauren's my name. I always thought of myself as a loving mother and a loyal wife. But one bright morning, while I was preparing the garden for a party, everything changed. Who would have imagined that a small act of kindness would arouse in me long-forgotten emotions? How may our wants alter our lives, and how far can they take us? This is the story of how my life was completely upended by an unintentional touch. If you want to know how this unexpected turn of events ends, continue reading. I was standing on top of a shaky ladder, wrapping lights around our patio. The sun was shining brightly, filling the backyard with warmth and joy. I always enjoyed getting ready for my daughter Casey's birthday, even though I was usually too busy to help. The ladder beneath me was trembling a little, but I kept working because I had grown accustomed to these small inconveniences. At that moment, I heard a voice that startled me. "Hello, Mrs. Watson. Do you require assistance?" The voice was deeper than I recalled, and I almost stumbled as I turned to see Michael, my closest friend Sarah's son. "Oh, thank you, Michael. That would be greatly appreciated," I said, attempting to maintain my composure as I downed the ladder. Our hands met for a moment as he moved forward to stabilize it. I experienced an unanticipated emotional outburst from that little touch. Michael continued, his eyes sparkling with mischievous intent. "I just got here and noticed you could use some help." "That's really nice of you," I said, guiding him to the garden where the other decorations were waiting for him. His confident, light motions were captivating, and every time our hands unintentionally touched, my pulse began to race. I couldn't help but sense his presence as we were working together. "How is college going for you?" In an attempt to start a casual conversation, I inquired, but there was a hint of intrigue in my voice. He smoothed out a tablecloth with ease and said, "Great, Mrs. Watson. The usual mix of studies and social life, but it's nice to be back home. Everything seems calmer compared to the campus." I chuckled, although it sounded a little uneasy. "I can imagine we've all missed you. Casey talks about you often. Hopefully only good things," he replied with a light smile, temporarily dissolving the growing tension between us. "Only the best." I assured him, our eyes meeting for a moment that seemed endless. In that moment, I realized that a simple touch and a smile could ignite feelings I had long forgotten. As the evening drew closer, shadows began to stretch across the lawn, and guests started to arrive at the party, came alive with sounds of conversation and laughter. Nevertheless, the hidden spark that had ignited between us during the preparation continued to smolder, connecting us with invisible threads among the crowd. When the party began, I noticed Michael among the guests. He quickly attracted attention with his charisma and infectious laughter. Our paths crossed again at the drinks table. Michael, is the center of attention, was telling a funny story to his audience, hanging on every word. When he saw me, he paused and handed me a glass with a conspiratorial smile. "Mrs. Watson," he greeted me, "saving the last glass of Casey's favorite drink for you." "Thank you, Michael. I think I really need this," I replied, our fingers touching again, and that familiar spark shot through me. We gradually moved to a more private area of the garden, where dim lighting and a personal setting allowed for a more intimate conversation. Our laughter and light-hearted banter continued to separate us from the rest of the party, and Lauren started calling me by my first name for the first time, his voice sounding almost intimate. Surely, suburban life isn't all parties and home renovations. I took a sip to conceal my embarrassment, aware of the curious looks from nearby partygoers. Before I could respond, Casey's voice broke the tension. Her tone was playful but tinged with curiosity, making it seem as though you've won over Michael, the most important lady here. I laughed, feeling surprisingly at ease. "Oh, it's wild. Sometimes choosing paint colors feels like the most exciting decision of the day," I said, smiling. He laughed too, his eyes lingering on mine for a moment longer than usual. "Maybe you need more excitement in your life. You know, I've always had a soft spot for your family," she said, causing those around us to laugh. I managed a light response, "Casey," but my heart was pounding with excitement and trepidation. Michael gave me a quick, inscrutable look before smiling at me. "I just kept good company, Mom. The entire evening passed in a blur of quick glances and whispered conversations with Michael, each interaction sending a thrill through me that I struggled to suppress his question about needing more excitement in my life. As the party came to an end and guests started to depart, I felt a mixture of relief and disappointment because the night had revealed more than I had anticipated. His touch was a quiet promise of unresolved sentiments, and our hands lingered for a moment. "Good night, Lauren," he said in a whisper that was solely for me. I said softly, "Good night, Michael," with a mixture of eagerness and remorse in my chest. I made an effort to lead a regular life after that party, but every time I saw the lights or went past the garden, Michael's presence was always on my mind. We hung close, and I would remember our fleeting touches and exchanges. It was insane. How could I let myself fall in love with my best friend Greg's son? Greg was always focused on his work, and we only talked about business and taking care of Casey. It felt oppressive, so one day I decided to leave the house and spend some time at my favorite cafe to decompress and find some peace. When I walked in, the doorbell greeted me, and the smells of freshly brewed coffee and pastries mixed with the aromas of freshly brewed coffee. The cafe had always been a place where I could escape the daily grind. After ordering my usual cappuccino, I searched for a seat and surprisingly found Michael sitting in the corner with a laptop. "Lauren, what a welcome surprise." I tried to remain calm as I approached his table, but he exclaimed when he saw me and gestured for me to join him. My pulse began to race, and I felt a flush crawl up my cheeks. "Hello, Michael." I sat down across from him and remarked, "I didn't expect to see you here." He shut down his laptop and concentrated entirely on me, saying, "Yes, I like to switch on my study spots. It helps me stay focused. Would you want to have coffee with me?" "Thank you," I said, but I already got mine. As I raised my cup, we had a relaxed stillness during which the stress from our previous discussion appeared to vanish. Leaning slightly in and dropping his voice as though to reveal a secret, Michael broke the stillness. "Lauren, Greg's wife, you're quite different from what I anticipated." I was taken aback by his remarks, and my heart skipped a beat. "What were you anticipating?" With a tone of both interest and worry, I inquired. "I don't know," he said, looking at me thoughtfully and probably more reserved, "but you turned out to be so lively and interesting that I couldn't help but laugh." "I'll take that as a compliment, Michael." "Thank you." Our conversation flowed smoothly from one topic to another, including favorite movies and books, personal dreams, and things I hadn't talked about in a long time, even with Greg. Michael listened intently, and his thoughtful responses made me feel understood and connected on a deeper level. When it was time to leave, Michael moved closer, his voice soft. "I truly enjoyed this time. Lauren, perhaps we could do it again." "Yes, it is what I would also desire." We said goodbye at the cafe door, and as I made my way to my car, I felt the desire to see him again take hold of me. Although retreating seemed reasonable, I felt that it was getting harder and harder. The allure of the unknown pulsed through me, igniting a sense of life I hadn't felt in years. Days went by since our meeting at the cafe, and every time I passed by the cafe, my emotions kept swinging between excitement and guilt. I kept telling myself that this is madness, but deep down I knew it was more than just desire. It was a feeling I couldn't ignore despite all its consequences. Before I could process it, I recalled that Michael had highlighted his talent for resolving technological issues. Michael picked up the phone fairly instantly when I phoned his number. His voice was kind and inviting. "Hello, Lauren. How are you?" "Michael, I'm sorry to bother you." I began trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm having some computer issues. You mentioned you were good with these things. Could you help?" "Of course, I'll be right over," he replied without hesitation. When he arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. Michael sat down at the computer, and I stood nearby watching his confident movements. Our shoulders accidentally brushed, sending a familiar wave of energy through me. "Just need to tweak a few settings," he murmured, not taking his eyes off the screen. Our faces were closer than we had anticipated, and looking into his eyes, I realized that avoiding this attraction would be difficult. Our lips met in a gentle yet passionate kiss, which soon deepened, expressing all our suppressed emotions. When we pulled away from each other, I could barely breathe. "We can't continue this, Michael," I whispered, my voice trembling, realizing I was saying this more to myself than to him. I know, Lauren. I'm sorry, he replied, avoiding my gaze. We finished fixing the computer in silence, and Michael quickly left, leaving me with a whirlwind of emotions. As soon as the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, trying to collect my thoughts. Every touch, every kiss, left an indelible mark on my soul, and I realized that this was far from over. A few weeks had passed since the party and our last encounter with Michael. I tried to keep my distance from him, but thoughts of him constantly resurfaced. Greg was absorbed in his work, and I felt increasingly lonely. One morning, as I was making breakfast, my phone rang. It was Michael. Lauren. His voice was kind and inviting. Perhaps we could get together and have a conversation. I felt conflicted, but I agreed. All right, Michael, let's meet at the Lavender Garden Cafe. I hoped that the familiar setting would help me remain composed. I put on a short SE green skirt and a form-fitting blouse that accentuated my figure. I saw a confident woman in the mirror, but when I got to the cafe, I noticed that Michael was sitting at a corner table. He got up when I walked up to him, and he said, "Lauren, you look stunning." I sat down opposite him, and my cheeks began to flush. I thanked him. "What would you like to talk about?" He said, trying to start the conversation on a business-like note about us. "I keep thinking about you all the time. I want you to know how I feel, even though I know it's wrong." He made an astonishing confession, and my heart began to race. We discussed our emotions and our next course of action. I made an effort to keep my distance, but every look and word drew me more to him. Michael proposed a walk as our chat came to a close. After leaving the cafe, we strolled along an alleyway adorned with blossoming trees. The aroma of lavender permeated the air, adding a romantic touch to our stroll. He paused at one point and grasped my hand. "Lauren," he began, his voice shaking with passion, "I know this is wrong, but I can't fight this feeling." Before I could think, I drew him close and planted a kiss on his lips after examining his face and his sincere, desire-filled eyes. His hands were around my waist, drawing me in, and I felt his fingertips brush the hem of my skirt. The kiss was intense and desperate, our lips dancing in what seemed like an unending embrace. His warmth seeped into every cell of my body as I felt his breath on my skin. As the kiss intensified, I became engrossed in the moment and forgot about anything else. Our breaths mixed, and our faces were quite near when we eventually withdrew. His gaze was so intense that I could feel my knees start to shake. "I can't conceal this any longer, Lauren," he muttered, his voice full of sorrow and desire. "I desired to be in your presence. Despite my confused sentiments, I was certain that I wanted to be with him as well. I could no longer ignore my feelings since this moment. This kiss and this confession were all true." I muttered back, "I do too, Michael," with a mixture of terror and delight in my heart. All that mattered at that time was us, our feelings, and our desire to be together, even though we knew that difficult decisions were ahead. We stood there clasped, enjoying the moment. The days that followed went so quickly. I made an effort to avoid Michael, but our desire was too great to resist. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every encounter, intentional or not, every word and look just heightened our yearning. Michael Lauren sent me a message one day that said, "Let's meet in the park by the old fountain. I must speak with you." My pulse pounded, and I knew I couldn't say no. I went for a pale white garment that accentuated my contours and gently embraced my body. When I walked up to the fountain in this dress, Michael was waiting for me, and I always felt light and confident. He was stiff and nervous. We locked eyes, and I sensed a spark explode between us. "I can't conceal this any longer," Lauren said again, his voice shaking with anguish. "Every minute of every day, you are on my mind." His touch was like an electric current coursing through my body as I moved closer and our hands touched. I said, my eyes welling with tears, "Michael, I can't stop thinking about you either, but we have to be careful. This could ruin everything." He drew me in, and we had a passionate, intense kiss. Through the thin material of my dress, I felt his fingertips lightly brush against my skin as his hands closed around my waist, drawing me in closer. The kiss was very passionate and desperate, and I could feel every cell in my body reacting to his touch. Lauren, I want to be with you, no matter what he whispered, pulling away from my lips and looking into my eyes. I knew our feelings were too strong to ignore. This kiss wasn't just a manifestation of passion, it was an acknowledgement that we couldn't live without each other. I do too, Michael. But we need to be careful, I replied. Try to maintain a semblance of common sense. We spent several hours together walking in the park and enjoying each other's company. We talked about our feelings, our fears, and how to handle this situation. Every word he said, every glance only strengthened my desire to be with him. Lauren, I don't want to lose you, he said when we stopped at a bench under the shade of a large oak tree. Let us meet in secret until we figure out what to do next. I knew it was risky, but the thought of not seeing him anymore was unbearable. All right, Michael. We'll be careful, I replied, feeling my heart torn between joy and fear. Our lips met again in a passionate kiss. I felt his hands slide over my shoulders, gently touching my touches were filled with love and desire. And I couldn't resist the feeling. My hands wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, and I felt his heart beating in sync with mine. These secret meetings became our sanctuary. We met in the park in secluded spots where no one could see us. Each of our dates were filled with passion and tenderness. We cherished every moment, knowing it could end at any time. One evening, as we sat on a bench under the stars, Michael took my hand and looked into my eyes. Lauren, I want you to know how much I cherish you. We spent that evening embracing and enjoying each other's warmth. Our kisses were tender and passionate, each one a declaration of love and devotion. We knew that difficulties lay ahead, but at that moment, all that mattered was our love and our desire to be together, no matter what. Several weeks had passed since our last meeting, and every day without Michael felt like an eternity. We kept in touch through calls and messages, but the desire to see him and touch him grew stronger every day. On one of those days when Greg was at work and Casey was at a friend's house, I received a message from Michael Lawrence saying, "I want to see you. May I visit?" I couldn't say no, even though I knew it was dangerous. My quick response was, "Yes, come." My pulse was pounding more quickly with anticipation, and my hands were shaking. I went for a form-fitting shirt and a short khaki skirt. In order to increase the intensity of the moment, when I heard the knock on the door, I purposefully chose not to wear any underwear. A beat skipped to my chest. When I answered the door, Michael was there, his eyes blazing with passion. We looked at each other for a few seconds before he entered the home and shut the door behind him. "Lauren, you look gorgeous," he said in a low, husky voice. "I'm grateful, Michael. You've been much missed." I responded as my cheeks started to flush, until the tension between us got intolerable. We stood there staring at one another. Michael leaned in to plant a kiss on my lips. I felt his hands around my waist, drawing me in as our lips locked in a passionate kiss. "I can't wait any longer, Lauren." As our lips briefly separated, he muttered, "At the moment, neither can I, Michael," to which I answered, feeling my knees begin to shake with want. He gently started to take off my skirt by sliding his fingers around my waist. When the skirt dropped to the ground, I felt his fingertips brush across my flesh, causing shivers to run down my spine. His eyes widened with desire, and he whispered, "You're so beautiful, Lauren." His voice trembled with passion, and I felt his hand slide under my blouse and gently remove it. Our bodies were close, and I felt every touch and emotion as his lips moved down my neck, leaving hot kisses that made me shiver with pleasure. "I want to be with you," he whispered, his voice full of sincerity and passion. "I do too, Michael," I replied, feeling my words full of truth and strength, and our bodies merging into one. His hands were careful and attentive, and I felt every movement and breath, and it filled me with joy and happiness. His lips repeatedly met mine, each kiss seeming like a declaration of love as our motions grew more passionate, and I felt the intensity engulf us. We became so engrossed in the moment that we forgot everything but our emotions and wants. Our bodies were entangled, exhausted, and joyful when we eventually came to a halt. When I gazed into his eyes, I saw commitment and affection. Michael said, "I love you, Lauren," in a quiet voice, but every syllable pierced my heart. I said, "I love you too, Michael," and felt my eyes well up with tears of joy as we lay together, realizing that our love was stronger than anything else and that we would fight for it no matter what. A few days had gone by since that private night with Michael, and at first I was lost in the euphoria of our feelings, but as time went on, the guilt started to set in. I couldn't stop thinking about Greg and how I had betrayed his trust. Greg was very important to me, and our family had always been my top priority. One evening, after Casey had gone to bed and Greg came home late from work, I decided it was time for an honest conversation. So I made a light dinner and, gathering my courage, I invited him to sit down. Greg looked at me in shock, but he sat down at the table. "What's going on, Lauren?" I took a big breath and began to speak as he requested in a caring and concerned tone. "Greg, there's been a long-standing issue between us. I feel as though I've lost you as we've drifted away. I made a grave error. I had an affair with Michael." I could see the sorrow in his eyes as they enlarged in amazement. He stayed silent as he processed what I had spoken. "I want you to know that it was a moment of weakness, even though I realize it's difficult to hear, and I'm not asking for an explanation. I still want to keep our family together, and I adore you." With tears running down my cheeks, I went on. "Why did you do it, Lauren?" With a quivering voice, he inquired. "We grew apart. I felt useless and alone. We didn't have any time together because you were so preoccupied with your career. I sincerely apologize for my error." I answered, my heart ached and heavy with shame. Greg groaned and gave me a dejected expression. "Lauren, I'm also at fault since I didn't pay enough attention to you." He said regretfully, "I believe that working hard was the best thing for our family, but in doing so, I neglected the most important thing, you." We sat silently, considering what we had spoken. Greg then came over to me, put my hands in his, and said, "I don't want to lose you and our family, so we need to talk about our issues and try to fix everything. Lauren, you are very important to me." I nodded as a wave of relief passed over me. "Greg, I also don't want to lose you." I squeezed his hands and said, "We need to work on our relationship to restore the connection we once had." We made the decision to face our problems and look for answers with the assistance of a family counselor. We began talking about our desires and feelings as we spent more time together. Slowly but surely, we started to mend our relationship. After a family session one evening, Greg gave me a gentle look and said, "Lauren, I understand why it happened and I forgive you," as we sat in the living room. "Although we both committed errors, I think we can get over them. I want our family to be happy because I adore you." Tears were streaming down my cheeks, but they were tears of hope and excitement this time. "Greg, you're also loved." I hugged him and murmured, "Thank you for understanding and for being willing to give us a second chance." We were both committed to improving our relationship, even though it didn't become flawless right away. We started to rediscover one another, enjoying the small things in life and cherishing our time together. We ultimately came to the conclusion that the most significant aspects of our existence were our family and love. We had triumphed over obstacles and come out stronger and closer. We learned from this experience to respect one another and not repeat our mistakes. Even though we were aware that there might be more challenges in the future, we were prepared to confront them head-on with love and support. Greg and I had made the decision to begin anew once a month prior. We worked tirelessly to help develop our connection, and every day brought us new delights and discoveries. Through our time together, we were able to rediscover one another and grew closer than before. Greg brought home a bouquet of roses, which are my favorite flowers, one evening after a long day at work. My heart was warmed by the pleasant surprise. "Hello, honey," he murmured, grinning and giving me the flowers. "Hello, Greg," I said, taking the bouquet as happy tears filled my eyes. "I appreciate this. It's quite lovely." Sitting on the couch, we relished the warmth and silence between us. As I leaned into him and felt his powerful arms envelop me, I knew that this was the moment I had always desired, Lauren. Greg stated in a genuine and loving voice, "I'm so happy we were able to overcome everything and find each other again. You are very important to me, and I will stop at nothing to ensure the happiness of our family." I looked into Greg's eyes and said, "I feel the same way, Greg. I've learned how much I value our family and how much I adore you over the last several months." I promised to always be there for you and support you in everything. We hugged, enjoying each other's warmth, and I felt how our mutual efforts had borne fruit. Our love had become stronger, and we understood that we could handle any difficulties if we worked together. The next day, we decided to spend time together as a family. We went on a picnic to the park where I once met with Michael. Now this place had new meaning for us, a symbol of a new chapter in our lives. Casey was thrilled about the day spent outdoors. We played ball, picked flowers, and enjoyed the delicious food Greg had prepared. At one point, I looked at Greg and saw him laughing and playing with Casey, and I realized that this was true happiness. As the evening came to an end, we sat together on a blanket watching the sunset. Greg held me close, and I felt his warmth permeates every cell of my body. Lauren, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything we have. You and Casey are the most important things in my life, and I will never let us drift apart again, he said, his voice full of determination and love. I feel the same way, Greg, I replied, feeling my heart filled with joy and gratitude. We've been through so much, but it has made us stronger. I'm confident that if we work together, we can overcome any obstacles. As we sat there together, we felt our hearts beating in time with the sunset. This occasion represented our rebirth and the beginning of a fresh, loving, and hopeful chapter in our lives. Although we were aware that we would encounter new difficulties, we were prepared to support and love one another through them. This tale is about the power of family, love, and forgiveness. We came to see that if we were prepared to stand up for what we believed in, even the darkest times might bring about light. Our family had grown stronger, and we were prepared to take on new difficulties because we knew that we could conquer anything as a team.